This is the Kosher Sommelier podcast. I'm Andrew Breskin, the Kosher Sommelier. Each show, we will discover some of the amazing stories and personalities in the world of wine. Wine tasting, winemaking, fine dining, and one of my favorite subjects, the wine business. So pour yourself a glass and enjoy the conversation. All right, here we are, everybody. Welcome back to the Kosher Sommelier podcast. Me, Andrew Breskin, here with you today. Thank you so much for listening, and also thank you in advance for following, subscribing on Apple iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Music, etc., and whatever other platforms you are using. Keep doing it. We really appreciate the support, the downloads, the sharing. Please, if you enjoy it, tell someone who might also enjoy it about what we're doing. We're happy to have more Kosher Sommelier followers going out there. So thank you very much. So I had a mentor early on in the wine brokering, wine trading, and as we were hauling hundreds of cases of wine up a staircase, out of a driveway, into a pallet that was going to be forklifted into a truck, after purchasing a very large wine collection, he said to me, "See, people always think that the wine business is so glamorous. Look at us having all this fun now." And we were just dripping in sweat, and it was just crazy amounts of labor that went into that deal. And the joke became, it's so glamorous. Really, there's a lot of fun that we do have, traveling and tasting and wine dinners and whatnot. But when we're not doing that, what do you think we're doing? And the answer is work. But that being said, like any business, the wine business is full of opportunities and it's full of ways to envision doing things better. And one thing that we do is business consultations and talk to aspiring wine entrepreneurs, something that I used to do more from the legal point of view, but now also from the business and marketing point of view as well, kind of all encompassing. So sat down with a friend of mine who is doing a new format of a wine club combined with marketing, and we spent some time together exploring that process. And this was the second conversation that we had that we recorded, and it's going to be the first in the series, kind of tracking the progress of this opportunity and some other opportunities that will come up along the way. So you can see a little bit behind the scenes of the more creative and business-oriented creative and business-oriented aspects of the wine business. All right, so wine business.
Love it.
Love it or leave it. Or not.
Yeah.
As the case may vary. Most people love it but stay with it and are just miserable. But
really? Are people miserable in the wine business? They're not drinking enough wine, I guess.
I know, right? But the 10 crack commandments, right? I mean, you can't drink too much of your own wine.
Yeah, that's right. That's true.
I personally, I get sick of my own wine sometimes.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you can get sick of anything.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Like I even get sick of looking at it sometimes. If I have the same product in for too long, I'll just be like, I'm sorry, I don't want to look at you anymore. And
What do you shift to then? Do you have to drink a beer?
Well, business-wise, I will sell other wines.
Oh, okay.
And drinking-wise, I will drink other wines, or I will drink beer, or I will drink spirits, but usually beer.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, it's entirely possible to get, and that's why I'm learning, like, even if business doesn't support it necessarily, like, you always have to change over your products and keep it fresh, because it just, it's like anything.
Yeah.
A relationship, a business,
right.
Wine, like, the same of anything is bad, and you get stale,
right.
And you have to do something about it. So,
are there kosher spirits?
So most spirits, well, I shouldn't say that. The answer is yes.
Okay.
The expanded answer is much of what's available in Scotch, bourbon, rye, gin, vodka is kosher. Most if not all cognacs.
Technically, you mean?
Like, just by definition, unless you do stuff to it to make it not kosher.
Okay.
That's a very general answer. And then cognac, since it's made from wine, has to be made from kosher wine.
Oh,
so most cognac is not going to be kosher.
Right.
And so, yeah. No, but I mean, like, you can go into most bars and get most, the complicated thing is if you want to get any sort of modifiers, those are generally going to be not kosher.
Oh, I see. Okay, got it. That makes sense.
Yeah, many bitters are not kosher.
The reason I ask is because I'm seeing, as we've discussed previously, my focus with my forthcoming wine business is very focused on the artisanal folks, the craft folks. And I've just been running into all of these craft spirits folks lately, some of which are based here in San Diego.
Yeah, I think it's the next thing for San Diego.
Yeah.
There's like one in downtown.
Yeah, there's a woman who is one of only 2 craft spirits makers in the country. And she's got a space in East Village. The brand is called You and Yours.
Yeah, drove by, saw it.
Highly recommend stopping in there, sitting down, and trying their stuff.
Okay.
Amazing.
Wow.
Really, really good. And they've got a small menu of drinks that they've made up leveraging their products. So they have 2 vodkas and 2 gins. And I'm sure, there probably is some seasonality to what they do, but essentially it's a really beautiful space. It's actually a good space to do events in too.
Interesting.
And they've got their kind of operation in the back, and you can do like a little tour. And then they've got a really nice long bar inside, and you can sit down and try their stuff. And they've done a really good job from not only is their product solid, but just from a branding perspective, they've done a really good job of kind of creating something that I think is going to not only attract folks that are kind of like, in the younger demographic. I don't even want to say millennial.
I think their branding is terrific,
Yeah.
and when I drove by and I saw a distillery in downtown.
Yeah.
I looked them up and I saw they had quite a significant following.
Yeah.
On the Facebooks and the Instagram.
The Book of Faces.
The Book of Faces, and it was kind of cool. I think that distilling is the next. I mean, it's not the next. It's actually happening for San Diego.
Yeah.
Which is funny because it's one more industry in San Diego that requires a ton of things that we don't have here.
Right.
Like water. And grain.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is just like, let's just bring all these things from out of state and distill them in San Diego of all places.
Right.
But whatever.
Well, the infrastructure is here from all the beer stuff, so
Yeah, I don't really know how it works with like spent grains and distilling, but I guess it's entirely possible.
Yeah.
I guess I really don't know anything about that, but it's happening, and there's totally a potential for those kinds of those kinds of collaborations to exist.
Yep.
Especially, I mean, with distilling, you have a shorter product turnaround time than you have with wine by a long shot.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, how long does it take to make gin? Like a week?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Straight into the bottle and on the shelf.
I mean, you don't have to wait for it to cool down.
No.
Right.
Like, that's true.
It's like, it's amazing.
Right.
And if you have a good brand, you can just pump it out.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyways, highly recommend. Very good stuff. I was pleasantly surprised.
So is that kind of, are you looking for, so you're trying to, we spoke about, you're trying to do, bringing to market some of the less represented but most authentic wineries in the state
and abroad as well. Really, the impetus or the central nervous system of the idea came from just going and meeting a bunch of these artisanal winemakers, mainly up north in Sonoma. That's where I've spent the most of my time in regards to like tasting and just kind of exploring. And I over the past few years really just started to hear kind of the same pain points with all of these folks, right? So a couple of key things. One, these people just are incredibly passionate about what they do, and they will just talk your ear off about the art and science of their product, which is amazing, right? They're the best salespeople you ever meet in your life, right?
Right.
When you go there and you meet with them and you walk the vineyard if they have one.
Right, and you're just there and you're just listening to them talk, and
Right.
you're pulling your wallet out, but
Yeah.
they're not even offering anything. If they're saying, "Oh, we're sold out," but I'm just telling you about it, and you're like, you get to the point where you're banging on the table,
Right.
Give it, take my money.
Right. It just makes that tasting so much more, effective, right? Because you've got this picture painted in your head, right? And as you taste the wine, it's a magical thing. But the flip side of that is that they have real pain points around exposure. I would say 90% of them have been burned by distributors. They've just gotten no love.
Yeah.
And they don't have feet on the ground salespeople either, right? So their whole business is based on word of mouth and partnerships, right? So a lot of these guys and gals are kind of locking arms with other wineries in their respective regions to try and drive business to each other, right? Which is cool. They're building a community around what they're doing, which is really exciting. But they're also all trying to figure out how to do direct to consumer well, right? So they're trying to cut out as many middlemen as possible and just get in front of the consumer in an effective way. Because ultimately their conversion goal is get them in the wine club, get them in the membership, right? And then, it's all about just retaining them, which ultimately if the consumer likes the product, they're in for life unless they really screw something up, or they can't afford it at some point.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, I think people will go to a winery, they will have that magical moment, which we can just summarize as a magical moment.
Mm-hmm.
But then, eventually, I think maybe, after several cycles, that could wear out. And I think that, there's definitely, what I tell people about wholesale and about retail is that the first sale is relatively easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the third sale.
Right.
Yeah. Because at that point, you have to really, and what's his name? The business consulting guy for restaurants talked about this, John Taffer, the bar rescue.
Yeah.
His whole thing is getting to the fourth, because once you're in the fourth, then you're like a regular and you're a lifer.
Right.
So how do you get there? You can't go back to that windy road Sonoma winery every year.
Yeah, of course.
Every other year.
Yeah.
Unless they have some sort of most of these places are not going to have the facilities to receive, large parties on a regular basis. Have release parties. They're not doing that. So I think that the challenge that you're with your background in digital media, how to help those guys recreate that experience from afar.
Yep.
And stay in touch with people.
Yeah.
And keep people engaged and keep people connected to the brand. I know that what we do, which I haven't been super good at this past year, but when we hit the road, I like to do a little write-up and tell people about what happened when we were away.
Yeah. Capture some good images and video if you can.
Try to do the imagery and really set the stage because most people, I usually go to Bordeaux and some other spots in France. Most people will never go to Bordeaux.
Right. It's not cheap to get to France.
It's not cheap, but people, my customers travel. Extensively.
Right.
It's just when you have your list of where you want to go.
Yeah.
Even if you love French wine, you're still not going to go.
Right.
Because you still have to go to Rome and Paris, and you have to go to Madrid and Barcelona and London and Scotland and all these places.
Right.
So I'll be the one to go to Bordeaux and tell you about it.
Right.
I know you're not going to go.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think that I would imagine based on what I hear from people that when you tell that story, it's like, and then people expect oh, he's going back. Well, let me see what's going on. So how does a winery recreate that experience of if you were there, bringing you back there, and if you've never been there, making you feel like you're still a part of it.
Right. And you hit it on the head. I would say that other main pain point with these folks is the marketing piece, right? They're not marketers. They're admittedly not savvy when it comes to where digital is at these days. Most of them have a very, very basic website. Some have some e-commerce elements, some don't. So that's another big gap with those folks specifically. And I think you just hit it on the head. It's around, really carrying through that brand story online and seducing folks, right? And it's twofold. It's getting people to learn about the brand on the front end, and then if you've gone up there and you've met the folks that work there and you've done the tasting room thing, it's extending that beyond that first visit, right? And just kind of keeping people aware as to what's going on. And right now the harvest stuff is happening, right? So you can see some of the folks that do it well, they're documenting that process and doing what they can to make people feel like they're there or they understand like what their process is. Right. But not everybody takes the time or has the time to do that. So that's kind of another gap that I'm hoping to fill, or at least support some of these folks on with that stuff, right? So helping them with capturing great imagery and videos, and then there's kind of the tactical stuff around just kind of getting that stuff out to the audience.
So you've moved away from the idea of actually handling physical product?
No, I'm going to try and do both in parallel. I think, as we discussed last time we talked, I think there's an opportunity to start to work with some of these folks via the marketing piece and just get in there, help them out, build the relationship. And then, maybe a phase 2 is like, hey, we've got this platform to help be another sales channel for you, right?
I mean, if you can crack that, I think it's genius, and I'll explain what I mean the benefit of everybody listening. But basically, in a standard wholesale relationship, by the way, as an aside, I used to do wholesale, but I've basically stopped.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and if any of my wholesalers are listening,
sorry,
it's nothing personal, but I'm saying it's like this, and everyone's going to agree. Maybe not everybody, but I mean, it definitely works for a lot of brands. But this is how I see it, which is just my opinion. Like anything else, if I sell to you as a consumer, that's one sale.
Yep.
If I want the product to be on the shelf, okay, first I got to sell to the wholesaler.
Correct.
The wholesaler has to sell to the retailer.
Yeah.
And the retailer has to sell to the consumer. Okay, that's 3 times as many sales that take place.
Right.
Now, for a product that requires a little more explanation than Kettle One vodka.
Oh, right.
Or, Kendall Jackson Chardonnay.
Yeah.
Or, the Blue Bottle Moscato, which I'm sure you've seen.
Right. Yeah.
There's only a certain amount of
education or
I mean, who's gonna stand there in a store on a busy day,
right,
and explain 15 different products from across 4 or 5 different distributors?
Yep.
It's not happening. Now, am I sour grapes about wholesale? I don't know. I mean, we had a good run, but I'm saying for me, if I have to spend 10 minutes on something, it makes a lot more sense to invest in a customer who's going to be a lifetime member, literally, or just kind of beg a store to take a product that they have to then hope someone's going to buy.
Right.
Which works for a lot of brands. I just think that our flavor is different. So taking that back to what you're doing is that how that would translate into reality is you are going to basically say, I'm going to sell you a way for you winery to create a brand, right? And they're going to pay for it. And then after they've paid you to create their brand, using the market that you've created, you will then sell their product, which will be a lot easier because you've already been paid to create the brand.
Right, and it, I don't know how many of these scenarios would be where we're actually creating the brand. I think a lot of these folks will already have brands and businesses that have been around for some period of time, right?
Yeah.
I think most of the support will be in building brand awareness and driving sales via digital marketing services, right? And then the platform that will be an extension of that agency, we'll call it, and I'll do the quote fingers things, is really to help on the D2C side more than anything. Because I know exactly what you're talking. I went out and got my hands dirty and sold wine for a while for some of these folks and did the whole, spoke to beverage managers and went to retail, and that's a grind. Yeah. I totally agree.
It has to happen. You have to have wine in restaurants.
Yeah, totally.
Just the question is, whose time is better spent doing that and whose time is better spent doing other things.
Right. And a lot of what I ran into when I was doing that was on the other side of the fence, on the retail side, specifically with restaurants. Everybody loved the wines that I brought to the table, but they were all locked into these distributor relationships where they were handcuffs, right? They weren't able to work directly with a winery, right? They weren't able to cut a separate check to somebody.
Right.
But the feedback was very similar across the board, which was like, yeah, we would love to have unique things on the menu. I've been, talking to the manager of the restaurant about it, and it's just like, no, we've got this distributor relationship. We just have to pick from their portfolio, and that's the cards we've been dealt, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely don't want to go down that path again. And when I was selling the wine, I kind of had to shift my strategy, and I started to go to places that were more farm to table and serving craft beer and that sort of thing, and that kind of opened up the doors to,
that's good stuff. Except those guys they'll move like a case every months.
It's not it's not high volume, right? So again, going back to really where I see my business adding value to these craft winemakers is really helping them down the D2C path, right? And so essentially what I'll be doing is, and I'm starting to have initial conversations with some of the people that I have existing relationships with, is at some point having them set aside some volume of maybe 1 or 2 bottles, and on my side doing what we can to sell through that volume of wine almost in kind of like a flash sale type of way, right? Where I'm leveraging our digital marketing abilities to sell that wine through. And
outside of their club or within?
Yeah, outside of their club. So essentially the platform acts as another sales channel for them, right? And so we're leveraging our digital marketing expertise to sell through that wine direct to consumer, which the value to the winemaker is, 1, they're getting some brand awareness that they never would have gotten before. 2, they've got another sales channel they wouldn't have had before. And we're essentially trying to sell through some of the value of helping to drive conversions for them, right? Which ultimately is getting them to go up there at some point, sign up for their wine club, right? And for us, we get a kickback on everything that we sell.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, because a lot of these, like, it really depends on how you sell it. Because a lot of these companies, like, let's say, wine is still sold out, or Cinderella wine, and those types of, where you get like a wine from a certain winery, maybe it's got the label, maybe it doesn't have the label. I'm just curious how that plays into branding. How do you make that website more of like a stepping stone to an upsell, and not like the appearance of sort of like a closeout, blowing through inventory, get it here because you can't, before it runs out, because this is going away forever type of thing.
I see what you're saying.
Well, a lot of wineries, like, one thing that wineries have a problem with is, when they do sell wholesale, because the winery can always sell to the consumer directly
Mm-hmm.
at the lowest price that they choose to.
Right.
So sometimes a winery will sell wholesale, and then this is why I don't carry a lot of different wines because on my website, because the winery directly can offer the same or better price than what I'm selling their product for them.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And
right.
so, in this situation, how do you preserve the integrity of the winery's pricing model and the winery's brand by selling the same product at, in theory, would be a different price, while not training people to not buy from the winery based on the possibility that they can get a similar product from a different company at a better price?
Well, I think it's twofold. So one, the model is, and there are other people doing what we're going to be doing, but on a broader scale, right? So I liken it to, a good example is, I'm sure you've seen the Somm movies or the documentaries,
Yeah.
right? So there were a couple of folks from that first one, the first group who passed that, the master test in
Yeah.
that first movie, that spun up e-commerce businesses afterwards, right? And they follow a very similar model where these guys are going and they're traveling around the world, they're meeting with winemakers, they're having these winemakers set aside some volume of their wine, and then the business is based on an email list, and they send an email once a week or once a month that says, here's the featured wine of the month, we've got X volume of it, here's the price, here's the very beautiful video of our visit to the winery and meeting with the winemaker,
Right.
And a nice kind of storytelling piece, right? It's basically like a nice landing page that kind of features the wine and the winemaker, and it's get it while you can, right? And a couple of these guys have built pretty decent businesses around that particular model. So what I'm trying to do is, along those lines,
Right.
certainly on a much smaller scale and more focused on this kind of craft artisanal space.
Yeah, and I like that model a lot. And I'd say we do the same thing. We do something similar where we'll go to winery and we'll buy this barrel or whatever, but we're not going to work with a winery that has its own club or its own, because then we don't want to compete with the same customers.
Yeah, got it.
So when I bring something from France or from if we make a California wine, which we have a couple of those in production right now, there's not going to be a twin version of the same product that will be sold by that company
I see what
to
you're
my
saying.
customer.
Right.
Because it just like, if we're working together, let's work together.
Mm-hmm.
But let's not like be in a situation where, where we're competing. Because it happens a lot. It's in our space, it's a pretty small community, and people tend to fight over the same customers. But I mean, that's kind of the point of my new platform, is to not have all the same customers as everybody else.
Yep.
Because I hate that.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I think I personally believe there's enough for everybody.
Yeah.
But I could be alone in that opinion. But
that makes sense. I mean, you don't want to cannibalize your own, audience.
And it's hard. I mean, I think that there's definitely an opportunity to leverage the platform to create the awareness for a certain winery, and then it's like a one and done.
Yeah.
Like, here's a rush to buy this wine, taste it, you like it, you want to get any more, talk to them, we're done with this forever.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because they'll never be like, if you find some like, around the corner, Sonoma producer making Zinfandel that's 100 years old, like, you'd have to make a promise to yourself. I mean, again, my opinion.
Yeah.
To make a promise to yourself, a promise to that company, like, we'll do this one time. And then after that, like, and maybe you can say, like, and we get a residual on those wine club orders.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
For X amount of time.
Yep.
And that way you have an incentive to never offer it again.
Yep.
And they have an incentive to give you something interesting.
Exactly.
To attract that thing.
Yep.
And then it could work.
Yeah.
But then you have to keep finding like one a month or one every quarter. you have to keep finding those kinds of wineries with those clubs,
right,
that you can take a piece of the action after the fact. And that sounds really cool.
It's a nice challenge to have, I think.
Yeah.
And again, I think the idea will evolve over time. We'll learn a lot. You're right.
Yeah.
And what the vision today might change pretty quickly, or it might evolve over time. We'll see.
But that sounds really, I kind of like the way I just said that.
But you're right. There are different attribution models that can be put into place where, we bring new customers into their fold, right? We get attribute, that's attributed back to us, and then there is some sort of model or agreement put into place where, great, we've driven that new lead for you. That lead is converted. You've got a brand new customer. We'll help you with the strategy to retain that customer over time through the digital marketing stuff and provide you the tools to do that. And, we just get a kickback for...
I think that's maybe even better than what we discussed in the beginning, because with this model, the winery they don't have to pay you anything. Up front at least, in the sense that, if you don't sell anything from this thing, from this initial offering, then it's like, okay, well, whatever. Sorry, either your product wasn't good, or we couldn't put enough lipstick on a pig, and and that's it. It's an old lawyer joke. If you lose, it's because you have bad facts or a bad client. It's never because of you. But in this situation, and then if you get the residual, then it's like, great, we had 40 conversions. It's like, okay, well, if you want to hire us for digital, then we can see about getting you to whatever. And then it's on them.
Yep. Or it's the reverse, right? We're doing that work to build the infrastructure for them on the front end and getting that engine running, and then we tack onto that, right? So it'll be interesting. Again, we'll see how this thing evolves, but really it's very focused on helping to solve some of these kind of key pain points that these folks are having. Definitely not looking to go down that traditional wholesale route. Again, that's a different grind.
Well, I like this a lot because you don't have to touch a single bottle.
Right. Exactly. We're not holding any inventory. We're facilitating orders, passing that through back to the winemaker. They do the fulfillment, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, this is smelling much better.
That's good.
We talk about
exactly.
It. Yeah.
This is a nice storage space that we're in right now, but I don't want to have to deal with that.
No. Yeah, it's cool to look at, but as far as
smells great. Yeah. 55 degrees. Love it.
I know, it's pretty. Yeah. No, we had to step out of the cold for a few minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I like it. I like it much better without the because it's like a sales funnel.
Exactly.
You want to go from here to there.
Yep.
And provide a clear path for what the business is able to envision in terms of their success, and there's clear parameters of what that's going to look like.
Right. And ultimately it comes down to some very fundamental things around building brand, building community around that brand, and then driving conversions, which is all very kind of like digital marketing 101 type of stuff. Now the X factor is like how you tell that story online and doing that effectively through
pure creative.
Exactly.
Whoever's going to be the most creative is going to win.
Exactly.
But in terms of digital and platform, are you considering like reinventing the whole wine club software to make your own thing, or would you?
No, and I've had conversations with some potential partners. There are a number of platforms that are out of the box that are out there, right? With the VineSpring or Shopify. There are iterations of WordPress that can be put into place, right? And there's always going to be some level of kind of customization that has to be done there. That's one of the kind of things in the wine space. There isn't a really good out of the box thing that you can just kind of put a pretty kind of front end layer on it and then hit the ground running.
Yeah, they all require a little tweaking. But I think that the challenge is when the business is dynamic, the software can't be dynamic. You can't keep reinvesting in software every time the business plan changes like a tiny bit. Which is what would have to happen.
Right.
And it's really hard. months ago, last spring when I was researching like a maniac all these different platforms, like, and I remember like we talked like it was really really hard.
To
find. And even when you find one, like it's still not a done deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially if you're going to be having tracking conversions and I mean you're going to need like some sort of a semi-proprietary way to do that.
Right.
I'm sure you can leverage one of the existing platforms
to
a degree.
Right.
But there's going to be some tweaking.
And how much time do you have personally as a business owner to dedicate to staying on the pulse of where all that is headed and like being in the know around what the new plugin is to help you execute this piece of your online business more effectively? And I liken it to, again, my background has been very heavy in kind of the e-commerce space over the past 5 to 10 years.
Right.
And it evolves every day. There's something new, right? And with a platform like Shopify itself, there are these like digitally native brands that start on Shopify and grow on Shopify. So like the guy, like I'm wearing this watch by this company called Movement. It's two guys that I think they went to college at like UCSB, dropped out of college their senior year because they had this kind of light bulb idea around creating a high design watch at a lower price point that would be totally dedicated to going after the millennial crowd through Instagram and social media, right? Yeah. And these guys, they spun up a Shopify site. It was almost kind of like a drop shipping model at first, and then it evolved to a true e-commerce company with real infrastructure. And they just got acquired by Movado like a couple of months ago for a couple $100 million, right? And this is like a 5-year turnaround.
Wow.
And there are a lot of companies that have done that, right?
Right.
The tricky thing with the wine business and the spirits business is there isn't that kind of very easy out-of-the-box platform, right? That allows you to do all the feature and functionality you need and the automation behind the scenes, all of that stuff. And then you've got to do the marketing too, right?
Yeah. I mean, wine is going to be naturally limited based on a couple reasons.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, physical product.
Yeah.
You can have X amount of something, and you can have more than that.
Yeah.
And then there's all the compliance and legality issues.
Exactly.
I mean, it is entirely possible to create a brand and you sell a brand. The brand is not tied to a geographic.
Right.
For example, what was it that just sold? I think it was Mare Soleil or one of these Pinot Noir brands was just sold off. For a lot of money, and they don't own like a single square inch of vineyard space. They have contracts, and they have a brand, and they have a flavor, and that was it. And then it's the buyer's problem to arrange for distribution and that kind of stuff. And of course, all the spirits brands that get sold and the beer.
Oh yeah,
I mean, it's like we're across the street from Ballast Point,
right? Who. A guy in a garage, 20-year turnaround from guy in the garage brewing his own beer to $1 billion check.
1.1 billion. And I mean, he started, literally across the street, that was the first. It's the homebrew market.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
And, but, so yeah, I mean, it's entirely possible. But that's purely, I mean, the case of the Pinot winery, I just can't remember the name. But in that case, that was pure brand. And with the brewery, I mean, there is like, I guess you can just sell the recipe and the brand. And that's it. But again, it's all, goodwill, intellectual property.
Right.
There's no, what are you taking over? Like,
well, and you might be referring to this as the example, but Costa Brown.
That wasn't the one that I was thinking about, but they sold out for $38 or $40 million.
I mean, that was interesting. The reason I bring that up is because they did on the front end, they did an amazing job from a branding perspective. They, the product is good to great. But they did an amazing job, even better job, around building a brand and creating some aura of exclusivity around that brand, right? And they did they were very, very rigid around where they sold through that wine, how much of it they let out to the public. They kind of created this aura of everything was limited edition, right? And so they built this kind of following around, getting on the allocation list and people waiting 2 years to get their first allocation, right?
And it was entirely, I mean, to a degree it still is. I don't think they have vineyards, but they have contracts.
Right.
If they didn't want to produce more wine, they would simply not produce more wine.
Exactly. And there was no tasting. You couldn't go to a tasting, even if you were a member, a buying member, there was no tasting room to go to. And you couldn't go to some nice fancy place and sit down and try their wine. It was the original. We are two guys who are crazy about Pinot, and we're gonna make it in our garage, and it's gonna be amazing. Yeah. Have you heard of the newest one, which is going to be the next Scarecrow or Screaming Eagle? It's called MacDonald. Okay. It's two brothers. They're probably in their early 30s, late 20s, and they inherited or something their grandfathers or their ancestors. I'm kind of butchering a little bit. Yeah. They had a vineyard in Oakville, in the Tokelon vineyard, that was it was farmed by Robert Mondavi, and he bought all their grapes for one of his reserve wines or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then when Mondavi was sold, they didn't want to use that vineyard anymore, and something happened. They were going to pull it out because the vines are very old, and these guys were like, no way. So they moved back to the valley, and they took over the field, and it's all these naughty old vine Cabernet in Tokelon. And they make 300, 350 cases a year. Yeah. And it's an overnight, cult wine. Wow. You buy it for release price is $1.50, and already there's a whole cult following of 500, 600 a bottle. Wow. Because the wine's supposed to be... Now, did the wine get rated?
It got some good ratings, for sure. Yeah. Okay. But I mean, no one had paid attention. Yeah. Except for this story, and someone dropped it on a forum one time, and so now it's they're just printing gold. Right. And they happen to be really nice, authentic people too. You'll get a personal note after. Oh, cool. Yeah. Hey, we noticed that you placed your order. Really appreciate it. Very cool. Hope you're doing well.
So those little touches go a long way. Yeah.
And it's amazing. The website is super, super basic. Which is really interesting.
I mean, again, just falls in line with
they sell one product.
That's great. I mean, the margin on that one product is probably astronomical.
The property value of their vineyard is probably in the millions. Yeah, right. It's not a big vineyard. Yeah. It's probably a couple of acres, I'm guessing. Yeah. I'm sure it's well into the millions. Yeah. But their story is of uncompromising on a family tradition, family obligation, and they weren't going to let any sort of occurrence happen to their old vines vineyard that their grandparents were farming. Yeah. And then you're reading that, and you're like, oh man, I
gotta get my hands on some of this stuff.
I gotta buy this.
Right? Yeah, totally. Yeah, so, exactly.
I mean, the secret sauce is just that, but that takes a lot of discipline.
It does. And going back to the Costa Brown example, that model started to cause them problems down the road, right? So they ended up at some point having to take on VC money and private equity money, and that just started to muddy the waters. And so they just got acquired by Duckhorn, I believe it was, that bought the brand.
I don't remember who bought it.
Yeah, so they, in the past couple of years, had finally started to buy up some vineyards. I think up in Anderson Valley, they had a couple of vineyards. Yeah. And they were starting down the path of kind of opening up that door, right, to kind of letting people in. And they have a nice, beautiful new operation and tasting room that they recently opened in Sonoma. So now you can go into the space and taste their wine. And now they have new labels that are more consumer friendly, not $150 a bottle, right? So the
yeah.
model, although it worked really well on the front end of their business for many years, it started to kind of work against them at some point, right? And so again, it kind of goes back to being very diligent and seeing the changes in the industry, and listening to your customers.
Yeah, for sure. You can only go one direction.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
and the best example is Screaming Eagle. I mean, they're not going to make. They actually have made more wine, but they've also raised the price.
Yeah.
Which hasn't stopped anybody from buying it.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's knowing your target consumer, right? And understanding that, like, we only want to be attracting a certain type of person who has a certain level of income that, you know, can afford this wine.
But Harlan raised the price of the same. And, you know, when you go on Facebook or, you know, the forums, like, people are passing on those wines.
Yeah, right.
And say, hey, you want to buy this at my cost? You know, like, forget about getting Screaming Eagle at someone's cost. You know? But again, Screaming Eagle makes, like, basically one wine. They make like occasionally they'll make a second wine from their young fruit or whatever. Right. Which also, you know, also sells through. But yeah, it's just branding and discipline. Right. And I think the discipline is probably harder than the branding.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah. Going back to what I said in the very beginning, like, yeah, I also get sick of looking at stuff, but, you know, like, if I've got a few extra cases, it's not going to help me to,
sure,
you know, throw it in the fire.
Well, I also like what you were saying earlier about, it sounds like you're partnering with some wineries to create a new, unique product that you're able to go to market with. Right. That's interesting. You know, I don't see a whole lot of people doing that or taking that path.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely happens, but, you know, I think that what I tell people is that, you know, my business is just a product of learning the hard way over and over and over again.
Sure.
I just
glutton for punishment, huh?
Yeah, but that's kind of the path that this business is. Like, you know, and I was going to do a separate episode on like contracts in the wine business and how they're basically like almost meaningless, but especially on the import-export side. But, you know, you just have to choose your market and choose your customers, because you really choose your customers in the end. Yep. Like, your customers might choose you, but you have to really choose them.
Yeah, correct.
And I feel that all my customers know that I really give them a lot of attention when they want it. Yeah. And I respect their space when they don't want it. Right. But when it comes to choosing brands, it's also a relationship. And, you know, I just had one guy who was telling me about, you know, how we're partners and we have a relationship, whatever. And then I found out that basically everything he was telling me wasn't true. So, you know, it's kind of hard to, you know, usually the relationships are, you don't have to, like, it's like when people tell you, like, I'm being honest. Yeah. You know? Right. It's like, okay, does that mean that everything you said until now, like, should I have been aware, like, the you know, you have to choose the people that you work with, you have to choose the brands that you represent. Yep. And I think that it's just the most clear, at least for my business, when, you know, it's there's no question about who's doing what and what the expectations are. Yep. And I know it's been a personal challenge of mine is to express clearly and effectively what my expectations and what my capabilities are. Yep. I always, like, undersell what I think I can do. Right. When it comes to producers. Yep. Because I want to over deliver, and not like in a cliche way. Like, I literally don't want to be stuck with a bunch of wine that, of course, I paid for and I can't sell because like I can't suffocate people with a certain product. Right. So I always test. Yeah. I always tell people, like, you know, I'm going to start slow, but if it goes well, like, we'll be in business forever, but I'm going to start slow.
So how much on the front end of that are you gaining some understanding of what the demand might be for a particular wine that you're buying up?
That's a great question, and the answer is testing. Okay. I mean, It's just testing. The first time I brought over Bordeaux from this one producer that I've been working with for a long time, I mean, I literally there was a company called Wine Flight, which doesn't exist anymore. They would pick up the wine from the winery, or the winery would like ship it from France to like some warehouse somewhere. From that warehouse, it would get to the airport and be put on a plane to San Francisco. And then from San Francisco, they had like UPS it down to me here.
Got it.
So it'd take like a week.
Yeah.
It was like $150 a case, which is not bad for what it was, but this is big bananas.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money. I did like 4 cases.
Okay.
This is in the very beginning of like the high-end kosher Bordeaux.
Got it.
And then I sold it.
Yeah.
And then I did 10 cases. And then I did like 10 again. And at that point, I was like, okay, let me do this properly. You know, we did it on a container, you know, brought over a pallet.
Sure.
And then after that, I was like, okay, well, I'm getting the feedback from my customers. They like this, but they need more of this. So then we created more of whatever that was.
Okay.
And then brought it over. Again, 1 pallet.
Yeah. And
then 1 pallet, you know, there's an opportunity to take more. It became 6 pallets.
Wow.
And then after that 6 pallets, you know, I had a mentor at the time. And I was like, yeah, I don't know what to do. He's like, well, looks like you just did it. You know, like,
yeah.
I was like, I don't know if I'm in this. I'm like, he's like, well, you know, we're standing in the warehouse surrounded by pallets and pallets of kosher wine. He said, I think the answer is like, you know, so I was like, okay, I got you, you know?
Yeah.
And then from there, like, you know, I thought it would be really cool to bring in kosher champagne because I like champagne.
Sure.
And I found a producer that I thought was really good, a grower champagne, the only kosher grower champagne. And so I went there. I thought it was pretty good wine. And then we just brought like 300 bottles.
Right.
Just put it on top of something else I was bringing over. And then sold it. And then 600 bottles. And then 1,200 bottles. And then magnums and half bottles. And just, you know, it was just gradual.
Yeah.
You just test it. And then you quantify what is, you know, the worst thing that can happen.
Sure. What is the feedback loop that you had with your customers to get that feedback? Was it just calling them? Was it some people, you know, like sending them an email or?
Well, that's a great question. With people tend to not have a problem to let me know when they don't like something.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Which is great. And if you're listening, that's great. Thank you. I just hear through the grapevine. People will post on Facebook. People will contact me. People will email me. And I also just like, you know, if I do a tasting, that's the best way. You know right away. You look at someone's face and they're grimacing.
Yeah, of course.
You know, and like you can tell, like everyone likes something when they're tasting it right in front of you.
Right.
But you can tell. You know, I can tell because you know when someone's being polite.
Yeah.
Versus someone's actually, and you can see it. I mean, you know, quite honestly, you can see it. There I go with the honestly. But you can see it like in the orders.
Sure.
You know, if you come to a tasting and you say you like something, you don't buy it, like, come on. You know, that's it just means that you didn't like it.
Yeah.
You know, because that's the time when someone would place an order for something.
So if you're introducing a new bottle to your customer base, how is that? How are you facilitating that? Are you doing a tasting? Or are you just promoting it via your website?
First wave is the website, and the next wave would be tastings and some sort of media. You know, sending it to people that I trust who'd write about it with their honest opinion. You know, one thing that we're doing, which is a little bit crazy, is I had a guy on who makes orange wine.
Oh, okay.
And so he's got a little bit of reputation for that, and you know, I tried about 5 or 6 of them, and some of them are pretty intense, and they taste really weird. And there was one, and I mean, it's not a secret. You know, like it tastes weird. Like, you know, if wine tastes like pickles, like it's just, you know, that's unusual. But there was one that was a little bit more tame and really kind of interesting and contemplative. And so I said, you know what, like, let's try it. I know what is the worst case scenario, and as you do it for longer, your tolerance gets, you know, I don't say my tolerance gets bigger for risk, but At the same time, like just the margin of error is not a bigger percentage, but it's just a bigger number because the total number is larger. You know what I'm saying? Like 1% of 1,000 is smaller than 1% of 100,000.
Right.
So it's still 1%.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to look at it like a different way. So, but I mean, some things I won't test.
Yeah.
You know, there's wines from certain regions. I'm not gonna name names, but you know, I'm convinced this is not gonna work.
Okay.
And I'm just not going to go there.
Yeah.
If it's like borderline and there's other stuff in the portfolio that makes sense, then we'll give it a shot.
Got it.
But some places in some regions, like, it's not happening.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And that's just either it's because of I'm closed-minded, or it's because like I just don't feel that it's going to sell.
Yeah. Well, at this point, you've got a good understanding of what your customer base is how they're going to react to specific things.
I hope so. And I mean, like, if I don't, then I'm doing something wrong. But I really hope that I can kind of get what people want, and you know, make it work for everybody.
Yeah.
So, all right, man. Well, we'll do this again.
Yes.
Check in and see how it's going.
Let's do it.
Yeah. But it was really
more
awesome.
to come.
Yeah, for sure. Really appreciate it.
You bet.
All right, everybody. Hope that was enjoyable for you, interesting, stimulating, give you that insight of what goes on behind the scenes, the more creative and business marketing side of the wine business when we're not tasting and drinking, etc. So please join us on Facebook, Instagram at Kosher Somm. Send me an email, andrew@koshersomm.com, with any questions, comments, or whatever you've got. Please never be uncomfortable sharing, and hope to catch you in the next one. Again, this is going to be part of a series. We'll track this project and some other ones where you can listen to the conversation, be the fly on the wall, and I will serve as the sounding board for people's ideas and give my feedback. And it's a lot of fun for me, and I hope it's as helpful for them as it's as fun for me. So anyway, guys, thank you again. Subscribe on Apple, on Google, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for listening to the Kosher Sommelier podcast. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, where you can be part of the Kosher Sommelier community. That's Kosher, SOMM. Until next time, cheers.